Imagine being the strongest god in existence, someone who can crush mountains with a single throw of his hammer, and still getting completely humiliated by an old woman. That's exactly what happened to Thor. Today, we're following Thor and his brother Loki on one of the most disastrous road trips in Norse mythology. A journey where nothing is what it seems, where every challenge is rigged, and where even a god has to learn there are things strength alone can't beat. First, quick introductions, in case you're new here. Thor is the god of thunder, Odin's son, built like a mountain, with a temper to match. He carries Mjolnir, a hammer so powerful it can level entire cliffs, and always finds its way back to his hand. He's not exactly the smartest god in Asgard, subtlety has never really been his thing, but when it comes to raw, terrifying strength, absolutely nobody in the 9 realms comes close. If something needs smashing, breaking, or defeating head-on, Thor is always the answer. And then there's Loki. Technically a god, technically Thor's brother, though not by blood, and definitely not by personality. Loki is clever, unpredictable, and constantly talking his way into trouble, usually with a grin on his face the entire time. Where Thor solves problems by hitting them until they stop being problems, Loki solves them with words, tricks, and the occasional outright lie. He's the kind of god you want on your side in a negotiation, and the last god you want watching your back in a fight. Put these two very different brothers together on a journey, and you already know it's not going to go smoothly. So here's what happened. Thor and Loki set out from Asgard together, heading east toward the land of the giants of Jotunheim, a realm of frost, stone, and things much bigger than either of them. Along the way, they pick up 2 servants, a young man and his sister, and by nightfall, deep in unfamiliar territory, they stumble across a strange structure in the middle of nowhere. It's massive, one huge chamber, with a smaller side room branching off. No one's home, so exhausted from travel, they settle in for the night. But in the morning, they wake to a sound like thunder and realize that hall they slept in wasn't a building at all. It was the discarded glove of an enormous, sleeping giant. The side room. One of the fingers. That's when it really sinks in, they're not in Asgard anymore, and everything here operates on a completely different scale. Shaken but determined, they keep moving, and eventually reach a fortress unlike anything they've ever seen, the castle of Utgard, ruled by a giant king named Utgarda-Loki. The walls are so impossibly tall that Thor and Loki can't even find a gate. They end up squeezing through the bars just to get inside. Once through, they're led into a massive hall, where the king greets them from his throne with a smirk that already tells them he isn't taking the small gods particularly seriously. He tells them plainly, no one stays under his roof unless they can prove they're actually good at something. No exceptions, not even for gods. And with that, the challenges begin. One of Thor's companions steps up first, the young servant boy, who claims to be the fastest runner in all the realms. He's matched against one of the king's own men in a foot race across the hall. The signal is given, they run, and the boy loses. Not by a little, by an embarrassing margin. He asks for a rematch, tries again with everything he's got, and loses again, even worse than before. Then it's Loki's turn. Confident and hungry, quite literally, he challenges anyone in the hall to an eating contest, certain that nobody can out-eat a god. A long trough of meat is placed between him and his opponent, and they eat from opposite ends, racing to meet in the middle. Loki finishes his half in record time. Sure, he's won, but his opponent has eaten not just the meat, but the bones, and the wooden trough itself. Loki loses before he even understands how that's possible. Now it's Thor's turn, and by this point, he's furious. First, he's handed a drinking horn and told that even the weakest men in the hall can empty it in 3 gulps. Thor, insulted by the suggestion this could be a challenge at all, takes a massive gulp, and barely makes a dent in the liquid. He tries again, drinking harder, longer, and still barely lowers the level. Humiliated, he's given a second task, simply lift the king's old grey house cat off the ground. Something a child could do. Thor grips the cat, plants his feet, and pushes with everything a god of thunder has, and barely manages to raise one single paw off the floor. Finally, boiling with frustration, he's offered one last challenge, delivered almost as an insult: wrestle the king's elderly nurse, an old woman who can barely stand on her own. Thor accepts immediately, certain it will be over in seconds. Instead, she grips him, and no matter what he tries, he can't put her down. She throws him off balance again and again, until eventually, exhausted, Thor drops to one knee in defeat. The next morning, humiliated and ready to leave, Thor and Loki are stopped by the king one last time, and what he tells them changes the entire story. That servant who outran Thor's companion twice, that wasn't a person at all, that was thought itself. Nothing, not even the fastest legs in the 9 realms, outruns a thought. The horn Thor tried and failed to empty, its other end was secretly connected to the ocean itself, out of sight. Thor didn't fail to drink it. He drank so much of the sea that he's the reason the tides rise and fall to this day. That house cat he could barely lift. That wasn't a cat, that was the World Serpent, the massive creature that coils around the entire world. Thor didn't just fail to lift a cat. He pulled a world-sized monster so far off the ground that the sky itself panicked. And the old woman who beat him in a wrestling match. That was old age. Not a person, a force. Nothing alive has ever defeated old age, not humans, not giants, not even a god. Every single challenge, from the very first race to the very last match, was never really fair. It was all illusion, deliberately rigged because if Thor had known what he was actually facing, and fought it head-on with everything he had, he would have torn Utgard apart. And the giant king knew it. So Thor didn't actually lose that day. Not really. He unknowingly went toe-to-toe with thought, the ocean, a world serpent, and time itself, and still nearly came out on top. It's one of the only stories in Norse mythology where Thor gets outsmarted instead of just outfought. And honestly, that's exactly what makes it one of the best. If you want the next one to be Loki getting himself into trouble completely on his own, let me know in the comments.